first thing I'm actually going to do is introduce a colleague of mine. So before we get underway with today's content, the hard stuff about, why we're here today, which is about winning funds for innovation and how to improve your chances of success, I'd really like to introduce my colleague, Catherine. And Catherine's just going to talk to us briefly about what else is available to you through Oxlep, just so that you're fully aware of what you can access. So, Catherine, is that okay? Over to you.
Thanks very much, Peter. Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Catherine. I work with Peter on the Innovation Support for Business programme at Oxlep. I just really wanted to just dip in and just take a minute to mention a couple of the programmes that we've got going on at the moment, and in particular the Peer Networks programme we have, which is open for applications for just another 2 weeks. This is actually a rerun of another programme that we ran earlier this year in the same type of format, which had fantastic feedback, really amazing, and we had over 150 businesses from Oxfordshire signed up, and it's all really about working together in small groups with other participant businesses just to learn from each other and discuss problems and challenges and plan ahead for the year. And it's really well worth you having a look. So what we'll do is I will pop a link to the Peer Networks site in the email that we send after the webinar, just so that you can have a look at that and see whether you think that's something of interest to you. And just alongside that, if you have, or even particularly if you haven't, it's worth them just having a look at our business support tool that we've also got on the website. The great thing about the business support tool is it acts like a kind of a triage. It takes no more than a few minutes to complete. And it means that we can get back to you with a personalised plan, which will just kind of signpost and summarise some of the other opportunities we've got going on in terms of things like one-to-one support, advice, mentoring, other grant funding that we can offer, things like the Foundations to Growth programme and the Business Accelerator programmes, and all the types of things we can offer now and also upcoming, but it kind of gets you in the system, if you like. So it was just really to highlight the peer networks as something that kind of is closing very soon, and that we're really keen to help businesses make the most of, and then also just that business support tool, which is kind of the gateway, if you like, into finding out about all the other types of support we can provide. So thanks very much, Peter. I'll hand back over to you.
No, that's great. Thanks very much, Catherine. So that's Peer Networks, which I'm not sure now we've got a much smaller group, but I know that with the group that we had on this time last week, there were definitely some people that have been on the networks and found them useful, and use the business support tool as a point of access, really. So I'll probably forget to mention that again when we get together at the end of the session. But thank you very much for Catherine to coming and joining us for that today. Okay, well, let's get into the content for today. So I'm just going to try and share my screen again, and hopefully, Catherine, you can nod at me. Perhaps have we got my slide up again? Thank you very much. And Catherine, don't feel like you've got to hang around because you know some of this stuff, but totally up to you if you want to stay. So protocol for today, as before, if you remember, keep your microphones off for the moment, but more than happy for you to do, and it's sort of better for me in a way if you do keep your cameras on. Today's session is following on from session 1 last week, which I can't remember whether you guys were actually, everybody managed to attend that. There's a recording available if you want it, but we were talking about how to go about finding funding for innovation. So we will look at some of the organisations that provide innovation funding and some of the schemes that they've got and how you might go about generally getting an innovation funding search activity underway. Now, today's session is a bit lighter on that sort of, prescriptive content and a bit more interactive, hopefully. So today, what we're going to talk about is how to improve your chances of success. I want to cover off a couple of fundamentals. Those apply whether it's an innovation scheme or otherwise, but they do need mentioning. I want to talk about the level of innovation in your project and whether or not it's enough for appropriate schemes, for the schemes that we're looking at. And then I want to give you or leave you with 4 key concepts. It's kind of things to think about, but in my view, they underpin a lot of innovation funding schemes. And if you address these concepts, you improve your application and you subsequently improve your chances of success. Similarly, if you can address the particular elements that funding bodies like to see, you're going to improve your chances of success, and we'll talk about some of those. And we'll close with some thoughts about how to build a funding strategy again. So that again links back to session 1. Now, depending on the number of people that eventually make it into the session, we might go into breakout groups, but we might just sort of leave it as an open session as there's not too many of us. So that's, you know, let's play it by ear and let's see what works out for the best. What I'd say, by all means, use the chat box, or I think conversation, as teams call it, to put any questions or observations. I won't be able to monitor that too closely, but I will have a look at it periodically, and my colleagues, if they're still on the session, can bring things to my attention. And we'll definitely have time today for an open discussion. Just having a little look. We've got about 10 people joining us, so we might break out into a couple of groups, or we might just sort of see how the discussion goes. But it would be great if you could participate today. Okay, so the first bit is me talking, I'm afraid. So let's get on with that. I said first of all that I was going to cover off some basics and some fundamentals. I won't spend too much time on this. We did mention some of this last week. I'll let you read that through. I wanted to get these out of the way, really, because these are true for any kind of funding application, whether it's in an innovation one or something, you know, just another government scheme or any other scheme or application for some support that you're aiming for in the development of your business. One thing I would say is that try and be self-critical. Use a critical friend as well, particularly if you're talking about innovation. Get somebody to look at it, get somebody who's not sort of immersed in the technology or the idea or the product or the service, and get them to give you some honest feedback about, you know, whether they understood it and whether you can improve it. So that stuff goes for whatever application you're applying to. If you go through that little sort of checklist, then, you know, that's one way or some ways of improving your chances of success. Let's, however, think about what you need to be successful for innovation applications in particular. Now, in my view, it's absolutely fundamental that you understand what the funding body is trying to achieve with their particular scheme. Now, you could argue that's the same for an application, but I'm arguing it's even more important for an innovation one, because a lot of innovation schemes, as we shall see and we saw last week, are aimed at achieving something, and the funder is trying to either make something happen or get something done. So that's a fundamental step, and we'll talk about ways that you can do that. Second fundamental step, or fundamental thing to improve your chances of success, is to have a very strong and a very relevant idea. So it's relevant to the funder and the funding body. And I'm afraid a lot of people do waste time trying to convince a funding body that their idea or their technology or their product or service is relevant to that scheme, but it may not be. And I think sometimes once you've highlighted a scheme and you're working on it, it's quite hard to let go of it almost and say, actually, I'm wasting my time. Let's move on to something else. Finally, once you've spent, you've done some investment in point 1 and point 2, you've got your basic concepts in place, then obviously it comes down to some extent to strong and good and clear presentation. And I do run another course about how to write proposals and reports from that perspective. But that's something that we kind of won't go into too much today until we get to the Q&A part of it. So understand the funding body, strong and relevant ideas to that funding body and that scheme will improve your chances of success. So letting go of inappropriate schemes is quite a difficult but an important thing to do. Now, I'm going to stop sharing because I want to ask you a question just to get you a little bit involved, like we did last week with a poll. And the question is, why do we fund innovation? So why do innovation funding schemes exist? Just think about that. I've got some suggested answers. Just firing up the quiz as we speak. It's a little bit slow actually today. I wonder if that's one of the reasons why people had a problem joining. So hopefully somebody nod to me. You may have a quiz in front of you. There's only 4 questions, 4 answers. Why do we fund innovation? Why do the government, if you like, quite often, and other people provide innovation funding schemes? Now, I would ask you, you can do multiple answers, but I'd ask you to restrict yourself to 2 answers. So if you click on the box and submit your answers, let's see what happens. I think we should see the results more or less in real time. So I think there's 10 of us or so in the meeting. We've got, so I think somebody's put their answer in the chat box, but I'm not sure whether that means that's your favourite one, perhaps, to grow the economy. So let's have a look at the answers. And I'm really pleased, actually, that a lot of people have voted for addressing challenges and solving problems. That's really good. Now, when I run this quiz, or ask this question when I'm working with a university, quite often they tick that last one to keep people employed, to keep the system working, to keep the thing ticking over. But that's generally not the case, or at least I don't think it's the case with the kind of funds that we are looking at. Perhaps if you're obtaining funding from a research council, then arguably there is an argument for keeping the research capability of the country going. But in general, the kind of schemes that you'll be applying for are there for a specific reason or multiple reasons. And, it can be any of the 3, but I'm pleased that most people thought that addressing challenges and solving problems is particularly important. Okay. So thank you for doing that. I'll go back to my presentation. Why do we fund innovation? Absolutely. We don't really fund innovation because it's nice to have or to keep researchers employed. We also don't really fund it because SMEs and smaller companies and startups need help. We don't really do it for that reason. We do it because we've got problems and challenges to address. Now, I did this slide quite some time ago, and you'll see that the kind of things that we were concerned about at the time, they haven't really gone away. population demographic change has effect. The aging population has a significant effect on the economy, and it presents lots of challenges and problems. Very topical, of course, is the environment and global warming, as we now call it. Environmental challenges. A little bit of concern then was global wage rate disparities and how that was affecting the economy. We could add other things to that now, like global security. We could add things like population movement through immigration, wanted or otherwise. So most funding schemes are there because the funder is trying to address something. So unless you get your head around what it is they're trying to do and what problem they're trying to address, then you're probably going to find yourself knocking on the wrong door. This is evidenced in the types of schemes that we were talking about last week. I just want to briefly cover that off again. Some schemes are what we call non-thematic, so they are open to everybody. They're open to good ideas. They're generally aimed at smaller project teams and have smaller amounts of funding and things involved. If you like, they are led by your innovation and your technology. But increasingly, the serious money, the bigger money, is around what we call thematic schemes, where they have a specific topic of focus. They support larger projects and larger teams, and they involve larger amounts of money, and they are sort of challenge led. So the first ones are technology inspired. You've got a great technology, you're trying to find a home for it, or it has multiple homes, and you have to find some help to bring it forward. But increasingly more money is available if you can help address particular challenge. So open schemes like the SMART scheme, or indeed Oxlep's Go Create schemes, are more inspired by the technology. They're not there to address particular challenges, but it makes them particularly competitive. Somebody told me this week that the SMART scheme from Innovate UK had thousands of applications in its last round, and it's only going to support tens of projects, if that. So you're kind of fishing in a very competitive pool if you're looking for that kind of funding. Now, what I'm going to talk about today will help you increase your chances of success, but it's still going to be a very competitive thing. If you can find a fund where your product or your solution addresses a particular challenge, then I think you're already improving your chances of success. Let's move on and talk about the level of innovation, because I know this is something of concern to people. Are you innovative enough? Well, in general, for innovation funding schemes, and this is where you have to be quite self-critical, they're not there to support what we generally call incremental innovation. So modest improvements in either performance or impact, for example. They're not there for that. So if, hand on heart, your innovation is modest in terms of its impacts, or doesn't really mean it's not valuable, it's just not game changing, then a lot of these schemes probably going to be wasting your time if you go for them, because they tend to be looking for more groundbreaking or significant shifts. Doesn't exclude you, but think about how you present what you've got, and can you find ways in which it is disruptive or game changing. And just a quick one on the difference between incremental innovation and game-changing innovation. Here's an example. So for multiple innovations in the sailing world, we would have seen a number of years ago lots and lots of innovations on these kind of yachts that improved incrementally their performance in a race. And to the uninitiated, you probably wouldn't see a lot of those changes. They'd be taking place within the sort of, design of the boat in ways that you weren't immediately obvious to you. But what we saw a few years ago is something that is genuinely disruptive. And I don't know if people remember this, but for months and months, certain teams were keeping their hull designs and the underwater wings literally under wraps, because they knew it was going to have a game-changing performance increase. So that was, that was a significant and a disruptive innovation that would have attracted quite a lot of funding if people had managed to sort of put that forward at the time. So the point of this little discussion is, you could have a copycat business, you could have copycat innovation or incremental innovation. If that's the case, then some of these funding schemes are going to be difficult for you to get hold of. But are there ways that you can present it in such a way that does attract the attention of the funders? And for example, is there a market in which your innovation is not used and therefore is disruptive in that marketplace? Okay, let's talk about now. If you remember, the next part of my presentation was to talk about some 4 fundamental concepts that I think underpin a lot of innovation grant funding schemes. Therefore, if you pay attention to them and write your application around these ideas, you might improve your chances of success. What we might do, what I'm going to suggest though, because we're a relatively small group, I'm just going to break for a second. Is there anybody that would like to make a point, raise a question? I can have a quick look at the conversation to see if anybody came up. Somebody's had a problem turning their camera on. That's fine. I mean, as long as you can hear. Would anybody like to comment on level of innovation, different types of schemes, or any questions that have cropped up so far before I move on? You can, I think, put your hand up, or you can simply unmute yourself and let me know. All okay at the moment? Yeah, Liz?
A really quick question about this, because it's a very strong point you make about, is your product innovative enough? And I think as you develop in our case more of a service, you begin to see other ways in which you really can hit some other corners, but it becomes a service innovation, not a product innovation. Is there any sort of, and it's using a basis, and we've worked a lot on replicability of our product so it can be big enough. But it's really hard when you're starting up from one innovative idea on your own to then make it big enough and scalable enough that and afford a team when you haven't yet got the funding. It's that real chicken and egg.
It's chicken and egg, isn't it? Yeah, but I think you highlighted a good example there, and it helps me illustrate the point. If you are working on a technology which might, say, for example, be software, and you're working and you want to exploit that in the market that you know well, that's understandable, and that might be totally sensible from a commercial perspective. But if you can think about how that technology might be applied in a different situation, then you might be moving something into the more sort of disruptive field. Therefore, improve your chances of success with an innovation funder, even though you're going to apply it to your existing markets first in any case. And that's okay. Quite a lot of applications for Innovate UK are about, we've got this technology which is successfully applied in automotive, but less advanced engineering applications have never seen it. So what we're going to do is find out how this would work in their situation, develop the technology accordingly, and launch it and disrupt that market. So you're going to achieve your objectives by going another way around it, if you like. That's the kind of point that I was trying to get across. So thanks for that, Liz. Yeah. So that's sort of answer the question. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I will move back to my presentation and talk about these key concepts. So hopefully you are seeing my screen again, and got a nice picture of a very fast boat. But now we move to slightly less interesting graphics. Why are we applying for grant support? Now, this is a question that I want you to ask yourselves, because what I would like you to try and begin to do is to develop what I call a very clear and compelling funding philosophy or rationale. Might seem obvious. You need money to do your innovation, but is that enough? You need to be very, very clear about why you need the funds. Any funding body want to hear what it is that you need now to help you develop and exploit the technology, and why. And the main thing that in innovation circles that they're interested in is what problems are you looking to address and overcome in order to release the potential for your technology or your innovation. And I'll illustrate it here. So imagine that you and your partners are on a kind of journey of development, if you like, and exploitation, and that's represented by, going along the bottom there, and that's your existing activity. But in your mind, you have what I've called here an ambitious new application. So it might be a new market in the case that I was talking about there with Liz, or it might be, we've never applied this technology to solve a different problem, but we think it's got the potential and we need some help to do that. Why do we need help? Because there's a barrier that we need to overcome. In a lot of innovation schemes, it's a technical barrier, as well as, commercial, project management and financial barrier. So, but there is a technical problem that you want to, an innovation challenge that you want to overcome. So your funding rationale becomes, if you, Mr. and Mrs. Grant scheme, give me some money to do some work to overcome this barrier, which in this situation is a technical barrier, then you are going to unlock the potential of this technology and release growth, unlock this hidden potential for growth, which lead through to employment, which solves problems in the environment, whatever it might be. And that is the basis of your proposal. It's not good enough really just to say, oh, I need money to develop this technology because I'm at point A and I want to get to point B. You got to, point B has got to be particularly ambitious in an innovation funding scheme. And you've got to have a very clear understanding of what's in the way, what the challenges are to overcome to get to point B. And it can't be just simply, I haven't got enough money. It's, I need money to address these challenges. It might be acquiring resources, might be solving problems technically, using, specialist expertise, etc., etc. But if I do all this, then it's going to enable me to access a new markets, acquire new customers, grow the company, etc., etc. Now, I don't know, you can tell me later whether or not this is sort of, blindingly obvious, but I tell you from my experience, people can be quite poor at explaining and articulating what the key challenge is within their project and why they need money to help overcome it. So that's what we call a compelling funding rationale. And my recommendation is that you work carefully on that, and I can help you with that. Now, if you can do that and show that by doing that you are going to be disruptive and game-changing, etc., even better. So that's number one. Number two is something you can read up on. There's a lot of information about this, but it's a concept that innovation funders will know very well, but you may not be dealing with on a day-to-day basis, called technology readiness levels. It's another sort of clear reason why research and development is funded. And what I'm suggesting to you is that if you refer to technology readiness levels in your applications, then you will quite likely improve your chances of success. Now, what you have to do, this is a TRL hierarchy or level from 1 to 9, which was actually developed originally by NASA. So it's to do with, obviously, you know, space systems and rocket launches, etc. And different industries and different sectors have their own TRL descriptors, but they tend to be a sort of 1 to 9 or 1 to 10, etc. Now, all you have to do is say, I'm at TRL 3 and I need your help to get to TRL 5. And I'm going to overcome the barriers that I've already told you about to do that. And by doing that, I'm moving nearer to market and exploitation. Another reason for understanding this is that some funding schemes are aimed at particular TRL levels. So they may be aimed at feasibility, for example, down the bottom of the level, or they may be aimed at commercialization nearer to the market stuff, which is at the top of the TRL level hierarchy or tree. So the point of understanding this is that you don't waste your time applying to a funding scheme which is supporting a different TRL level. And you will find normally somewhere in the description of the funding scheme what kind of project they are looking to support. So, for example, you quite often get funding schemes that are looking to support technology demonstrators. So they're up at the 6 and 7 level. So if you're looking for money to prove feasibility and you'll spend time on an application there, you might be wasting your time. The other advantage of referring to TRL levels in your innovation funding application is it gives them confidence that you sort of understand these concepts of moving through a product design and development sort of life cycle or stage gate process. So that is a model that that I recommend you refer to. You don't have to use NASA's, you just talk about the concept and the fact that you need their help to move from one point to another, and it helps you illustrate that. So moving on to concept number 3, remember there are 4 of them. This one is what I call state of the art. And it's another one where if you were applying to a large collaborative research and development program from Europe, you'd have to spend a lot of time on this. Now, if you're applying to a more modest scheme, UK based, then not quite so important, but useful to refer to this, and useful because it improves your chances of success again. Now here is sort of a rather simplistic illustrate and out of date, I have to say, to be honest, description of state of the art as it applies to the lighting industry. And you'll see, OLED and PLED, and you would have seen that kind of lighting coming through in different applications such as televisions and things, and go back to the 1850s when we had gas lamps. Now, the point of showing you this is that so that you can explain your technology in terms of where it sits in the market, in the stage of development? Are you really leading edge, or are you taking something from, you know, one sector to another where it's not been used before? Where do you sit in this overall sort of environment, if you like, where you know, it is possible to determine what the state of the art is? Lots of innovation funding schemes would like you to be moving the state of the art forward. Now, obviously, if you're in a research team in a university, you've got a better chance of doing that because you guys are interested more in commercialization and having something sustainable from a you know, viable proposition. So you're not going to be doing fundamental research and moving that state of the art stuff on, but you are moving it on in terms of its application. When you explain state of the art in your application, tell your funding body what's out there already. Tell them what is in the research setting as far as you know and how you're involved in that, and tell them how you're going to move things on, either by yourselves or working with your partners. And now, again, this is a bit academic, but just referring to this kind of concept in your application will improve your chances of success. It gives the funding body confidence that you're not just, you know, pursuing something which actually has been in place for hundreds of years, and it doesn't really represent sort of any real innovation. And also that you understand what the competitive landscape is, who else is doing this kind of development out there, who else is trying to move things on. So understanding your state of the art in your technology is useful and helps improve your chances of success. Another one which is related to this is acknowledging the fact that different people will be working on different solutions to the same problem. In a way, they might be your competitors, but they might also be collaborators. I mean, think about how many people are working on mobility solutions at the moment, and how many people are working on low carbon initiatives for either mobility or housing or what have you, all with the same objectives of, you know, helping to mitigate against climate change, etc., etc. Now, what this attempts to show you is that your peer group and your competition groups may be working on similar or different solutions and might believe that the solutions lie in different areas to you. It doesn't do you any harm, however, to show that you understand that different solutions might exist and how you might work alongside them. It also mitigates the fact that you might get assessed by somebody who believes the solution actually sits in a different field, and that you might be arguing, or you might be potentially barking up the wrong tree. I think that if you can explain where your technology is positioned in this way, then you improve your chances of success, and you avoid the situation where somebody believes a competing school is more likely to be successful, therefore they won't support you. Just ignoring something else that's going on is a dangerous strategy. And you have to also question whether or not the particular call, where I say call here, I mean the particular funding scheme, is that addressing a particular technology camp, if you like, or a particular solution provider. And if it is, and you're not in that camp, then don't waste your time, look for one that is. And developing and communicating a clear strategy like this is going to improve your chances of success, no doubt about it. It doesn't have to be academically the best piece of work that you've ever seen, but I think hopefully it is doable in the concept of you understand the world that you're in. Can you explain that to the non-initiated? Okay, what I was going to do at this point, and I think might be still worthwhile, but just for 5 minutes, is to go into breakout groups, just because it's been all me talking. Now I know that we got off to a bit of a late start, and apologies for that. But what I'd like to do is ask my colleague Jordan. I think we've got 10 or 11 people. I mean, I'm suggesting just 3 groups, Jordan. Would that be possible to do?
Yeah, 3 works.
3 groups, but everybody just for 5 minutes. And I just want you to reflect, if it's not too hard, on those 4 key concepts. So we had positioning strategy, a slightly tricky one. We had technology readiness levels, bit more obvious. We had understanding and articulating the key problem. Pick one or all of those, and probably only got time. Just talk about one that resonated for you, and can you think of any examples that you'd like to share, that's occurred from this little discussion? How does it relate to your own situation? And then we'll use that content in the open forum. So I won't get you to report back. We'll come back, we'll finish my slides, and then we'll use the content that you had a chat about, hopefully in the open forum at the end. So just 5 minutes, if that's okay, Jordan, and we'll get everybody back at 12, and I'll wrap up my slides at that point. And sorry that we had a late start, but I really do hope that you can stay with us. Hi everybody, thank you for that. Thank you for coming back. I'm really sorry that that was cut short, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity to say something or hear from somebody else, which we will be able to do again in a minute when for whoever can stay with us, for a little bit longer. That would be great. But we did cut that short because we were so late starting. So now what I would like to do is just complete my content, which won't take me very long. Anything that cropped up, resonated, anything that really, worked for you in those key concepts, or indeed questions about those key concepts or anything else about innovation level, etc., etc. Hold on to those thoughts, make a little note of them, and please do raise them at the end. But I'll rapidly go through the rest of my content. I hope you can stay with me for that. So you should be seeing my my screen again, which is about the breakout groups. What I'd like to cover now is, last week we talked about, we talked quite a lot about Innovate UK, and because of the importance of Innovate UK, I've got a slide here, which is a bit of a personal perspective on what they are looking for in Innovate UK applications. So they're not looking, actually, I mean, if you remember the TRL level slide, Innovate UK generally are not there to fund basic research. Now, most of you won't be working on fundamental or basic research, and that's okay. They're there to fund nearer to the market stuff. Then, as we mentioned last week, they like to categorize research and development activity into typically fundamental, feasibility, industrial research, and experimental development. I won't go into those today, but you can find those definitions online and then see which sort of field you believe you fit into, and make sure that any scheme you're looking at isn't targeting one of the other ones. Therefore, don't waste your time. What you must have and must articulate very clearly as well as that fundamental problem or challenge that I talked about, your funding rationale, you must have a clear route to exploitation and have data to back it up, have evidence to back it up. And who's going to benefit from it? What problem are you overcoming, both internally and for the country perhaps as a whole, and what impact is that going to have? And any data that you can provide is going to support and increase your chances of success. Now, we do have something recently published, which is a UK innovation strategy, and Innovate UK has its own strategic objectives, areas that they want to support. So if you can align yourself with one of those, you improve your chances of success. We spoke about showing movement between TRL levels, and fundamentally your idea, in their view, not your view, their view, so you've got to persuade them, your idea must be demonstrably and significantly different from anything that has been developed in that area to date. So that sort of addresses the argument about, yes, this technology is mature, but not in that industry, or hasn't been used to solve the problem I'm addressing. Therefore, I need help to apply it to that situation. And that's the innovation level question. Innovate UK have this, or they used to have, I think they still do, have this this little mnemonic, ERICA, enabling, risk, innovation, commercial, and additionality. And so they like technology and applications to be enabling. It's an invention or an innovation that can be applied to drive radical change in the capabilities of a user or community or whatever, characterized by rapid development, but often applied to diverse fields. So if you got or can argue that your innovation is enabling in that sense, then it's going to be more attractive to Innovate UK. I won't run through all the other ones because you've got to be able to explain what the risks are, the innovation potential, commercial potential. Additionality means what difference does the Innovate UK funding make to you, your company, and your project? If you can't describe the additionality, they will say, well, why should we bother? You don't really need it. So additionality is, I've looked elsewhere, I've made use of these other resources or sources, and this is where Innovate UK, pat on the back, well done, you're going to make a real difference. So address the additionality question. And those other points there are just things that, I can go into at length another time, just things to avoid, like motherhood and apple pie, exaggeration, and any unsubstantiated claims. They hate those things, and you will decrease your chances of success if you don't address them. Now, I'm nearly finished. What are you trying to do in your application? You're trying to get them to trust you. They are going to give you public money. So what stages do you have to go through to encourage them to give you the public money and for them to invest or trust in you? And I would say it's a bit like a sales process, where in this one is persuasion is a process, and it starts with understanding. Have you explained, using the concepts that I've given you, what it is you want to do and why you want to do it? That's the understanding thing. If you don't get that right, you've lost them. But then if you do get that right, or nearly right, what can you do to make them care? So that might be about impact. It might be, getting them to imagine what the impact would be if your solution was was deployed, and then getting them to agree. Yeah, we agree that if this technology, this innovation was taken to market, then I agree it would be a great thing for everybody concerned. So you're getting them to buy in to your proposal. And what can you do in your proposal to make them remember you? How can you stand out from the crowd? There's a number of little tools and techniques that you might be able to do, using graphics, using quotations, using endorsements and testimonials, whatever it might be. I mean, some application schemes allow you to submit a video, you know, to do something using multimedia. Whatever it takes to make them remember you is going to be increasing your chances of success. The use step in the persuasion process is more akin to sales. They buy and they use your solution, but really you are selling yourself. How can you make them act on your proposal and basically put it into the pool of successful winners? Now, my final slide, and just to conclude, and thank you for bearing with me, is how do you go about building a funding strategy? So last week we talked about sources. Today we've talked about ways to improve your chances of success. Here are some thoughts, personal thoughts about both of those things, and what can you do to be a little bit more strategic in getting hold of innovation funding and winning it successfully. You can't do enough planning. I talked about that extensively last week, and I'd say even more than that, take a long-term view. Some of these schemes, you need to get your head around them. They come around periodically. You position yourself for success, but don't expect it to happen kind of overnight. I mean, you can be lucky, but it doesn't always work that way. Build your own journey, build a map, if you like, and show how the different funding schemes might sort of contribute to that journey. And one little piece of advice that I'd say, don't apply for more than what you really need now, because you can, although there are conflicting views on this, you can sometimes, believe it or not, get hold of larger amounts of money, which then actually, are harder to administer, and also bring with it great expectations of fast progress, which might be difficult to live with. So when you apply for what you really need now to do the steps, but to move you between those TRL levels, solve that problem, whatever it might be that your funding rationale was based on. And we talked about last week about how can you get things done, exploit schemes and ideas and things in multiple ways, and that comes back to your own projects. Where else could you apply your technology? Could you apply it somewhere else, which opens up a different source of funding, but enables you to repeat the effort? Not repeat the effort, exploit the effort in multiple ways. Being creative. What I suggest you should avoid doing is jumping from one source to another and leaving gaps in between. And a lot of people end up doing this. They get some money, they do some work, and then the work stops before they find some more money. That is, obviously problematic and not very attractive or strategic. And I've talked a lot today about don't bother to chase inappropriate sources, because quite often that helps that encourages you to lose sight actually of what you're trying to achieve. So if you try too hard to bend what you're doing to a particular source of funding, which might look very attractive simply because of the money involved or something, you can end up losing your way and not achieving those objectives that you originally set. That's being driven by the fund or funding and becoming a funding driven organization rather than what you originally were trying to do. Try not to put all your eggs in one basket is similar to the first point about jumping from one source of funding to another one without thinking about that longer term position. So that's about it for building a funding strategy. I can help you with developing this roadmap as far as resources, my time and everything will allow. And again, as I said last week, looking at the validity of sources and then looking using the concepts that we talked about today about how you could improve your chances of success. Don't forget, if you haven't already benefited from it, go create funding. Our innovation scheme can be part of that mix. And basically, I'm here to try and help you plan for success. My contact points will be given to you courtesy of the slides at the end of this presentation if you've not already got that, but I think most of you probably have. So, okay, I will stop sharing. I've talked way too much. Tried to keep on time given the late start. And quite a few of you are wonderfully still with me, so I'd really like to throw the conversation open. While we're doing that, I will have a look at the chat box. I can see some people have been posting a couple of things, but would anybody like to just ask any questions, either of me or anybody else? Alison, I think you tentatively thought about putting up your hand there. What I'd say to everybody, if you leave your cameras on, if you can, that's great. Although I know some cameras aren't working because of internet connection problems. Unmute yourself and fire away. Let's have a chat.
Thank you, Peter. I just wanted to ask, just very briefly, what we're looking to do is consolidate some old buildings into one new ecological build, which will give us more space, because space is our overriding challenge. We don't have enough of it. And we, for that project, which you can imagine is quite a big project, we will need multiple funders at different times. So I just wondered if you, I mean, a lot of the talk seems to have been around there just being one funder for your particular innovation. Have you any advice for people who will need multiple funders at multiple stages as you move up the TRL? You know, because we can't imagine there is one funder.
No, you're right.
Our process from beginning to end.
No, I mean, one thing I definitely wanted to get across is that there will be multiple funders. Now, in your situation, or there should be multiple funders. In your situation, for example, Innovate UK are never going to be really a funder for the physical property, you know, but they might fund some of the activity that goes on it or in there, or they might fund some of the technology that you want to deploy or develop. So I'd look to that type of funder for one purpose, and then, you know, yes, quite widely, you have to look quite widely for other types of funders for, you know, things like the infrastructure. With regard to, I mean, I'm not an expert, but if it's to do with property, I'd be looking at the local authorities, seeing if they've got any kind of regeneration type things available. I'd be looking at the landlords themselves, because quite often they know about things which help them get things done. And maybe talking to other organizations that have tried to do similar things. You know, I mean, it's a bit like your local tennis club. You know, when one of them is successful in building a new clubhouse, you know, the people from the other tennis clubs nearby say, well, how did you do that? And that's how you find about lottery funding. Yeah. You know, so you do have to spread it quite wide. But there are certain aspects of what you're doing which just won't be of interest to, you know, innovation funding, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, other people might be able to pop in the chat or tell us about schemes that might be available. But I would say definitely you have to cast it far and wide. And even while you're pursuing one and delivering on your commitments for that one, be looking at another one. And one way that some organizations do that is by allocating the fund search exercise to somebody, making it part of their job description almost, to say, look, you're, as a development person, one of your roles is to go and look at what you can find, because it takes time. And what some technology companies do is that they devote a huge amount of time to one thing, then they spend all their time delivering it and realize that nobody was looking around for the next thing. So releasing some time with somebody to do that is a good thing, if you can do that.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.
No worry, Annie's got a hand up, I believe.
Hi, Peter. Hi, everyone. Thank you. We don't have a camera, sorry, we're doing the meeting room. As I explained before, Peter, we're a husband and wife team, and you're quite right, time. Did you manage to look through the pitch? We took 2 days off, stopped developing, doing the software, which cost well over £2,000, stopped the whole business while we put the pitch together, and then waited for well over 6 months to find out what happened to the funding for the innovative online retail innovation fund, and then was just told it disappeared. Now, we'd followed all your advice, got a consultant, put the pitch together, did the PowerPoint, knew that our software was outranking US software, gave independents the same tools as corporates, and then suddenly it's all poof, gone. And it's cost us well over £2,000. So I sent it all to you to have a look at.
Yeah, I will
and
do.
Managed to jump. We've got another supermarket in Cleveland, they're all over the country, going live today, that we've saved £20,000 if they'd have gone to EPOS now, because they're using our till. So I just thought we don't have the time. My husband just said, stop it, Annie, now, because we just can't risk the time. And nobody seems to care at the council when we say, but it cost us over £2,500 to apply for that funding, and nothing's happened to it.
Yeah, I'm afraid that is.
And we've got family remortgaging their houses for us,
Yeah, I'm afraid it is a harsh reality that not having the time is the funders are just not going to be that bothered about that. I'm sorry about that, but that is the case.
It's disheartening.
Those of us that are involved in schemes do what we can to help minimize the amount of time that you have to spend in filling in forms and things like that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it is what it is with public money. It's unavoidable. I mean, what you may quite legitimately decide to do is not to bother with public funding for that reason. And
well,
lots
that's
of
why I
people
hoped
do
you'd
that.
had a look at my pitch, because I thought, well, if it's worth it, I'll put it in again for this one, for the
exactly.
Innovate UK.
I mean, having made the effort, then maybe we can recycle it, and next time won't be so much effort, and maybe, hopefully with
there should be some return on our investment as entrepreneurs with the time we invest. And we have demonstrably saved over 10 family businesses from going bankrupt in lockdown. We've slept by our computers since lockdown, and we've worked for 2 years without a day off. There's 2 of us, and we've written software
your
that's taken on Shopify.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that.
It's
What
upsetting.
I'm saying is your return as an entrepreneur will come from the success of the business.
Well,
there's no funding scheme
and then
that
that's
will
it,
just
back in the corporates. Yeah.
There's no funding scheme that will just support you for doing good things.
Indeed. Absolutely, indeed. So when you are told in May we'll give you in March we'll give you an answer, in May we'll give you an answer, in June we'll give you an answer, in July we'll give you an answer, in August, oh, it's gone.
Yeah, well, that's not good. And I mean, and we never do that in the Go Create scheme, for example. You will get an answer in the deadline, and that's not good, and that's worth a complaint, I would say. But having said that, I'm not really sure how far
I've
the
got time to
complaint will get
complain.
you. It won't get you very far. I would look to say, well, I have invested that effort. Is there somewhere else that I can sort of use that work that I've done and submit something sort of accordingly?
Absolutely. I've sent it all over to you, so hopefully you'll get a look.
I will have a look.
I sent it to Tracy as well, Tracy Jones, but it bounced back. It said she didn't exist at
No, there
Oxfordshire
isn't. There
LEP?
isn't a Tracy Jones. I think you
Is it
sent it.
James? Is it Tracy James?
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But
thank
she'll only ask me to look at it, so I wouldn't worry too
Indeed.
much.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Right. Thank you. Look, as long as you've got it, then you can just give me
Yeah.
once over it and go, keep going, Annie, or because I'm going to give up because we haven't got the cost to keep applying for funds that disappear.
Yeah. No, I heard that, and I would. Yeah. What can I say? You know, it shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
But I do say, you know, in my slides and my strategy, try not to put all your eggs in one basket. That particular basket looks like it was rather mismanaged, but hopefully most of the other ones wouldn't be. So
Thank you. Thank you anyway. Sorry, everyone.
Liz, did you have
Don't
a hand up? Oh, I think you're muted, Liz, at the moment.
Sorry, my real light bulb moment today was this focusing on some of the partnership opportunities and knowing what your peers are doing and partnering where possible to go for bigger hits. And I just wonder if you've got any insights into either funding available to develop partnerships or any suggestions on how to build, open up that funnel of people who can work alongside and doing similar research or similar supportive research and so on.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you had at least one light bulb moment. And if anybody else has got any light bulb moments that they want to share with us in the last few minutes, because we normally would finish at 12:30, but we started late, so I don't mind running over if my colleagues don't mind a little bit. There's very rarely funding available. There's very rarely funding available to help people develop a partnership. I'm afraid it's more of a sort of a commercial sort of investment, if you like, on your part. But there is funding which goes into networks and events and online forums and all that kind of thing. And we talked last week about the knowledge transfer network family of special interest groups and everything. I know that at the local level, there's quite a lot of business networks that you could probably, and I've got an information sheet on this, Liz, that might be of some use to you, that you can align yourself to and just try and find people that are like-minded. There's an interesting one on collaboration. When you get to the point of making a funding application, it's very important to be very clear about what each partner is both bringing to the party and looking to get back from it. And when you apply to Innovate UK or Europe, for example, they want to know that the parties concerned are not going to compete at the commercialization stage, which is actually, it does happen. So you have to have an agreement in place before you will get the funding as to how the commercialization will take place and who'll do what and who'll get what out of it. And that's sometimes reflected in an intellectual property agreement as well. Now, I'm not suggesting you go to all that trouble yet. The first stage really is just to sort of get your feet dirty, get involved in some of those networks, which at the moment is, well, over the last 18 months has been a lot harder than it normally would be for obvious reasons. I think it's beginning to open up. I've started to get invitations to events which are live events, and finding people who have, say for example, you've got a particular thing that you're trying to address which is beyond your current capability as a team. Then what you're really looking for is not only somebody who shares the same interest but has complementary skills and resources perhaps, and then they might know of a funding scheme to help address that problem. We are trying to put together some ideas for a small funding scheme there, where companies like everybody attending today can get some work done by a research association or a university or a research and technology organization. in the hope that that will seed those kind of relationships which then go on to collaborative proposals. So I think there's no real funding for partnerships, but there's help, I would say. And Liz, when I get a chance to catch up on the stuff that we've been sharing, I'll think about organisations locally that might be interested as well. Did anybody else have any light bulb moments that they'd like to share with us in the few minutes that we've got left? I'd really like to hear from anybody that hasn't sort of spoken yet. If indeed you'd like to, yeah, go for it.
Thank you. This is Malika.
Hi, Malika.
Thank you. It's just not a light bulb moment, but also it was really nice to meet other people and share their experiences, and to feel that actually we're not the only one that are going through the hardship and so on. So it was quite nice to have the feeling that we are going through the same stages, like we still struggling, we're still not sure and so on. So thank you, Sam, for sharing your experience. So it was really nice, because I've gone through the same stage, like I'm not sure about the funding and so on and so on. So it's really nice, again, this collaboration. And I didn't really thought about the collaboration, but since now you have mentioned it, so I'm really open about this collaboration and partnership with other people who are doing as well and looking for funding. So Sam,
yeah, well, that's brilliant.
Thank you.
No, well, thank you for those comments.
Yeah.
One thing I might mention. Thank you for attending. Just for the few people that are still with us, one thing that we are, I think, working on ideas for is whether or not we can try and get clients of Oxlep, if you like, of the innovation program at Oxlep together again, and we'll do some kind of marketplace whereby you can just wander around and see what else people are up to in their innovation activities, and in hopefully in a sort of non-salesy type of environment. So I'll actually, I think I've got a meeting with colleagues this afternoon, and I'll mention that again. If we can get that going, that would be something happening for the autumn. But it would be exactly what Malika was talking about there. Just give you an opportunity to find other people who are going through the same things, but also might have some solutions and might have some collaboration opportunities as well.
That would be great.
Okay. Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll happen, and hopefully we'll be allowed to do it.
Yeah, and it's also, just, can I just add, it's also really nice. So if we could do that, that means whoever managed to get the funding can share their experiences, what went well, what worked, what didn't, and share those tips. How do we get as well? How did it go? So thank you again.
I'm very aware that rather than listening to me, it's probably better to listen to somebody that just will talk through a project and where they got the funding from and how good or bad it was. And hopefully we'll be able to do a bit more of that in these webinars as well. Yeah, I mean, anybody else? I don't know who's. Feel free to unmute yourself and is that somebody with the microphone off?
Oh yeah, no, it's been a great experience. I think, as Malika said, just to bounce ideas around and find out what's going on, because I've been searching for the past few months in terms of grant funding, so that is why I applied to join this, just to get into the discussion and share ideas. Yeah, to really broaden my horizon, because I have been looking at specific funds, but there could be something that I probably wouldn't have thought about. Yeah. So yeah, these sort of platforms are a good way to get ideas from other people.
Great. Okay. Well, I think to back up, funnily enough, I did run a workshop on collaborating with the knowledge base. We might run that one again. And I think, you know, I've heard loud and clear that just providing an opportunity for people to talk to each other is quite a lot. So I think the next time we'll open up a meeting and just leave you all to it, I think.
Peter, could you run one of those peer-to-peer group support networks, just the innovation team, people interested? The one that Catherine was talking about, because there's obviously funding and a need for teams, but that would be brilliant.
Yes, it was talked about. I did put a proposal together to do it. And I think as part of that other program, yes, it's a good idea, Liz. And I think my idea was that it would be a peer group for innovators at a certain stage.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah, and then it would be you talk amongst yourselves, I'll facilitate it, etc., etc. I think it's just got hijacked slightly. No fault of anybody concerned, apart from the targets that are around the core program.
Understood.
Yeah, but we could look at doing that again, definitely.
Yeah, well, they are looking for now for organisations to join in, and I think with a theme, it would be worth doing.
Yes, it would be the same model, but with a theme and maybe a little bit more flexibility. That's what I proposed. So I'll take that up with them, see if they still want to do it.
I'm in.
All right, we got two of us then.
Cheers.
All right, thanks. Well, look, we've run over. People have been dropping off, and that's totally understandable. But we've had some nice comments in the chat, and there's also some people sharing emails and things, which is great. So thank you for everybody that's participated and contributed today. Much appreciated. Sorry about the tricky start, but we got there in the end, and the slides and indeed a recording of the main part of the content will be available to everybody pretty shortly. So we'll see you again soon. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.